So the one thing about Final Fantasy XVI's combat is variety. There's so much to use, so much to do. What the hell do you do with all of it? Now that's what I'm going to break down in this video. I'm going to go into some combat tips to get you better at combos and messing around with all the icon abilities. I'm going to give you tips for Final Fantasy mode and Ultimaniac difficulty, how to get through those the smoothest, and overall just use a lot of the mechanics to their full potential. Now, Final Fantasy XVI is not necessarily a difficult game. Your first run through the game, if you're on action mode, if you've played a lot of action games, it's going to be kind of easy for you. A lot of players will definitely struggle on some bosses, so I'm definitely going to give some basic tips here, more so how to get combos going and how to smoothly cycle through your iconic abilities. But the most of this video is going to be focusing on Ultimaniac mode, post-game stuff where you have all of your abilities unlocked. But let's get into the basics. Now, you'll kind of notice the more you play this game, each icon ability excels at one thing in particular, whether it's taking an enemy into the air, juggling an enemy, or causing massive HP damage, or possibly massive stagger damage. A lot of these do very specific things. Like, for example, Diamond Dust is fantastic in two scenarios. You can destroy stagger bars with it, or you could use it once they're already staggered to get a 1.5 multiplier on the damage. So it's kind of like whenever you choose to use these abilities is going to be very important, and you got to find the ones that you flow with. Whatever ones you find fun, whatever ones feel nice on your fingers to get flowing together. When you find those and then figure out what uses they have, that's when you're going to start getting really good at just destroying everything in this game. Now, there's definitely some standout abilities, but all of them could be used and all of them are pretty damn useful. But I'll go ahead and throw out some abilities that could possibly help you on harder difficulties or if you're struggling your first run. Willow Wikes is incredibly useful if you're getting hit a lot. It's basically going to give you a defensive shield, and it also staggers the enemy if you're close enough to them. So if you need a little bit extra protection, Willow Wikes is really good. Lightning Rod adds a lot of extra damage to your normal combos, so if you're good at placing this in the right areas, you are going to be doing a lot of extra damage to enemies. In general, Zantenzuken for Odin is extremely powerful. It'll wipe out an entire mob, even on Ultimaniac difficulty. So learning how to get it to level 5 almost at all times and keeping that in the back of your head, very good. And then one of my personal favorites I'm putting on here is Rising Flames. Not many use it, but I think it's very underrated. It comes out very quickly, the cooldown is pretty short, and the damage multiplier is actually very high. So every time you pop this, you'll just get a good chunk of damage, and then you're in and out of there very quickly. I think it's very underrated if you just want some extra damage. Now that I outlined a couple abilities that are kind of overpowered, I'm going to go into some basic tips to help you guys out with flow and combos, and then we're going to get into all the tips for Final Fantasy mode and Ultimaniac. Your full burst combos are pretty important for a little extra damage and also really good for juggling. Basically, after every single swing, you can click triangle and it will do an extra little burst with your magic. It could go into training mode and it will show you when you're clicking your buttons. It'll even give you some signals when to do it to help you practice. I would definitely practice this because the final burst at the end of your combo, if you keep triangle held, it'll actually launch the enemy really high into the air, and having the enemy in the air in this game is just better than the ground. You can juggle them, you could do a lot of crazy things to them, and nothing could really touch you. Unless an enemy like snipes you off screen, not many enemies are going to be able to touch you when you're juggling something in the air. You could pretty much kill them from the beginning of their health bar to death. I'll also throw out the ability Impulse because I use this a lot to keep enemies in the air. If you use Torgal or pretty much anything to get an enemy lobbed into the air and activate Impulse, those orbs will continuously keep enemies in the air. You can keep them there so you could lose less damage, like they won't be touching you, or it'll just continuously keep them in the air for you to do extra combos. So besides those full burst combos, I would practice using Torgal. He's very good at keeping enemies in the air, and the Precision Sick is really nice for some extra damage. Precision Sick will basically activate if you activate Torgal's attack directly after a big finishing move. Whether that's an ability or the finisher of your combo or a down thrust, any ability that has emphasis or any attack that has emphasis, if you click Torgal directly after, it'll say Precision Sick and he'll basically go all apeshit mode and go on fire and kill things. Learning how to flow with Torgal will actually be very useful. It's like having your own set of combos on the D-pad. It's really nice. Another thing I would definitely practice is parrying. Now, dodging is pretty easy in this game, and then a lot of the iconic abilities give you separate types of dodges, which we'll go into later. But parrying is actually pretty tough in this game, and it is because it's one of the only ways to stun bosses, and it does some pretty good damage and lets you be invincible for a little bit. Basically, in every action game with a parry, I like to think of something, whether it's early timing or late timing. This is my own personal little trick I use in all action games. Sometimes it'll benefit you to wait a little early, or it'll benefit you to wait a little bit after. In this game, I like to think it's a bit early. Every time I've been practicing, if I swing a little bit early as the enemy goes to swing, it usually parries them. But you basically need to hit your sword right when they hit their sword. Another thing that really helps is using the Odin blade. That one is a lot easier to get parries with, and I use that the majority of the time. But learning how to get parries right will definitely help. Like I said, usually when I would swing kind of late, it would always get me hit, but trying to practice doing it a little early actually worked out in the end, and I found the timing really good. Once you find the timing, you could pretty much do it over and over. And like I said, when to use your iconic abilities are very important, because you could usually keep enemies very stun locked. Right here, I'm going to show a combo. You could pretty much do something like this with a whole bunch of different variations and keep a complete mob stunned. So bosses are a different story, but if you learn how to do certain little things like that, you're going to be having a pretty easy time with mobs. I think that covers enough to get you rolling on base game or playing through action mode. Now I'm going to get into some tips on how to beat Final Fantasy mode, and especially how to beat missions on Ultimaniac mode. I always try to answer as many comments as I possibly can, so if you guys have any more questions on base game or things of that nature, definitely leave them down below and I will answer them the best I can. Final Fantasy mode isn't too bad. Once you've already beaten the game, I definitely think you will have the skills and all your abilities unlocked to be able to take on Final Fantasy mode. Just know they will have a lot of mini bosses in a lot of areas that didn't have them before, and I would say stock up on potions more. It still lets you have a whole bunch of potions like you did in the base game, except this time when you get hit, you do lose a lot more HP, and I found myself like sometimes going into a boss and I'm like, oh shit, I got no potions left over. So I would definitely go back to the shop or your hideout and get some potions if you're running low, because you won't notice you're actually losing them because of the more damage increase from bosses. If you're not the best at action games, the bosses here might start giving you a little bit of a tough time. Just remember, pay attention to their moves and try to dodge all of them. It's not bad if you die. You are not a bad player. Learning boss movesets on harder difficulties usually results in you having to die a few times to learn each of their moves. Death does not equal you are bad. It is a learning experience. Beforehand, the bosses would kind of stagger with anything. With Final Fantasy mode, and especially Ultimaniac, you gotta pay attention to the stagger bar. You're basically going into the boss and you're not paying attention to the HP at first. It's how do I get him staggered? So you gotta look at your moves like Diamond Dust or play around with some other ones that really drop stagger. And then if you put those in and learn when to use them, you basically are aiming for knocking them on the ground over and over. During certain moves and doing combos when they're staggered definitely adds to the multiplier, which gets you a lot more damage. But by that point, I think you'll know how to use iconic abilities, like you'll have level 5 Odin, you'll have a whole bunch of stuff to do good damage. So definitely learn how to drop their stagger bar as fast as possible, in my opinion. Now, Ultimaniac mode is pretty damn tough. I'm someone who plays a lot of action games and I got my ass whooped. It's pretty fun. I do have some critiques, but I'm going to have a few other videos going in on reviews and critiques, so look out for those. But Ultimaniac mode is going to send you through a mission. You could choose to have no cutscenes, which is nice, even though there's still slow areas, walking segments, and some cutscenes in there, so it's kind of dumb. But you go in there and you only have one potion and one high potion. If you lose on anything during the mission, you will get sent back to the very beginning. And it is brutal. Like, I went in sometimes trying to get to the very end boss, even just to hear the music and get that W. And I'm halfway through it and I lose to one little goblin and it's just all the way back to the beginning. So be careful. I would keep your health full at all times, even if you lose a little bit. I wouldn't really wait for the limits to make your health go up. Like, even if you're really good, something may snipe you off screen. So I would just use your potions when you get hit and your health is too low. Keep your health as high as possible and just try to go to the very end. I've played a lot of these missions now, and they all kind of consist of the same thing. You go into a room, you have to beat a mob. You go into the next room, you beat another mob. You go into the next room, there's a mini boss. You go into the next room, and it's like the final main boss section that you would, like when you're doing the main story, like the Titan fight or the Garuda fight or something like that. Now, for the mobs, I honestly suggest learning how to wipe them out in almost one go. The longer you stay in the room, the longer it is for you to get hit and lose a big chunk of your health. So learning how to use things like Odin, Zantensuken, or Bahamut's abilities to get things wiped out right out of the way is really good. My personal strategy that has been really good is start off with Bahamut and use Wings of Light. Basically, whenever you dodge anything, it's going to fill it up a lot. The iframes on this are insane. You could basically spam it and it will dodge most things. I'm not saying spam it, but it's pretty dang safe. So once you get that to level 5, shoot that off, and then I swap over to Odin and try to get Zantensuken to level 5. Now, I learned parries pretty good, so I do some of those to fill it up. But the abilities from Odin are so nice to fill it up. My personal favorite to raise it is Heaven's Cloud. It's extremely fast, the cooldown is pretty short, and you're pretty much invincible during it. Nothing ever really hits me, so you could always pop to that and it will just keep raising your Zantensuken. Sometimes it's even useful to pop that Zantensuken at level 3 just to wipe anything that's in your way, and it will usually kill them. Basically, it's just how to get the mob out of the way as fast as possible. Will-O-Wisp comes in very handy in this mode. If you basically want a bunch of extra hits, put Will-O-Wisp in. You could edit your accessories as well, so you could also add more duration to your Will-O-Wisp. There's a few ways around the big damage bump when enemies smack you in this mode. Now, I'm someone who dodges, and I based pretty much this whole video on a lot of dodging, so if you're someone who actually kind of likes blocking and you enjoy the Titan class, you could definitely do that here to negate damage. Now, you would just have to practice it and make sure you don't get staggered through, but that is definitely other viable option. But Odin mixed with Bahamut and then pretty much using whatever else you want to use is very useful in my opinion, and that's what I personally did to get through a lot of these mobs. In some scenarios too, using Flames of Rebirth is good because you could get back the HP that you lost right there, but I honestly eventually took it off for certain other things. I think abilities that keep enemies in the air are superior, so if you find iconic abilities that match your playstyle, and then you're keeping enemies in the air and finishing it off with a Bahamut or Zantensuken, you're gonna wipe mobs very easily. Now, unfortunately, Ultimaniac mode is kind of an endurance test. I really hope there's DLC with boss-specific missions where you can go in, fight a really nice strategic boss, and that would be a lot of fun, because so far the missions, you're basically trying to survive as long as you can. You're probably going to die on them even late into these missions, and you're gonna have to just retry them over and over until you'll basically be getting the first 3 mobs wiped out perfectly, and then you'll eventually get to the boss and learn it there. So just keep practicing on those fronts. Remember, learn Torgal, learn your basic moves that'll get enemies into the air, because you could just keep juggling them. And yeah, there's not much else to the combat or any tips in Final Fantasy XVI. I'm definitely opening to hearing more, so definitely write some down below if you guys have any extra tips that could help out players. Ask questions, I will definitely respond to them. I hope this video helped somebody or it was fun for somebody. I appreciate you guys, and I love coming on here doing these videos. I'm going to have a Final Fantasy XVI review coming out in a couple days, and then a Final Fantasy XVI boss critique in a couple days, so definitely subscribe if you haven't. Look forward to those videos. I love you guys. I will see you next time. Peace.